I'm standing in front of the Great Wall of Stuff, all the bits and pieces that I use in my shrine making, because today I'm going to start talking about telling a story. And these things are all the bits that help me tell those stories. So, storytelling, when you're using words, is pretty straightforward. You start at the beginning, you tell the story, you end up at the end. And hopefully, in between, you have created imagery and a world that people can relate to and understand. And um, that's essentially what I try to do when I'm creating pieces, but I do it visually rather than verbally. So I try to come up with a theme and assemble pieces that tell people the story that I want to tell them in the piece. And I work really hard to make sure that everything that goes into each piece contributes to the story. And I think that's the difference between creating a visual story and presenting people with something that looks like you cleaned out your junk drawer. Not that those two are mutually exclusive, but I see a lot of mixed media pieces that are just a bunch of stuff, and the only thing that unifies them visually is maybe they all came out of the same junk drawer. We're going to try and avoid that by learning how to tell a story and assemble pieces that contribute to it. When I tell a story, I like to get my idea down to maybe one or two descriptive words that tell me what is going to happen inside each shrine. So I thought about this while I was laid up, and I wrote down a word for each one of these. So this one is love. And I'm thinking on this one, even though it's Frida and she's holding paintbrushes and it could be art, that it's going to be love, because inside this, there's probably going to be a photo of Diego Rivera. And I also have a quote picked out for that, which I'll talk about in a little bit. So this could have been art, or it could have been just Frida, but the word that I chose for it is love. We'll see how that goes. This one is dream, and I think that comes from the black surround and the blue of her hair. Could be bad dreams, could be nightmares, could be magic, but for now it's dream. This one is very obvious. Red. Red. And I have a quote picked out for the inside of this one already. These two. This one, also very obvious. Sea. Ocean. Water. And this one is magic. Kind of Day of the Dead type magic, but still magic. So one of my personal symbols in almost all of the different types of work that I do are glass bottles. And I like to fill them with all sorts of different things. So the first thing I did with these was I went through my stash and figured out which sizes of bottles fit in each tin. And because they're oriented differently, different bottles look appropriate for each type of tin. Like, I didn't put any of these teeny tiny bottles in these because they look so small that it's almost a mistake, unless I end up putting them in front of other bottles and kind of like that. So I have that in the back of my head, but for the most part, I'm working with the larger ones right now. So bottles, that's pretty generic. I'm telling the same story in every tin right now. But as I fill them and decide what else goes in with them, the stories will start to diverge. So the next thing I went for was my stash of skulls, and I have skulls in all sorts of sizes, from about the size of my fist down to these teeny tiny little skull beads. So I pulled out some that I thought worked well with the different tins, since so many of them are Day of the Dead themed, or have some sort of skull going on with them. So I liked a little skull with this one, maybe because it's got an undersea thing going on, and I thought treasure skull, I have some little gold coins and a pearl right here. So I kind of have this sort of undersea thing going on. So maybe a little skull, maybe not. This one, I like this little decorative skull, but I also like these little bitty ones. On a previous shrine, I did a line of these along the top and then decorated them with paper flowers, and I thought that might be a fun thing to do with this. So I'm still sort of trying to figure out where skulls are appropriate on this one. I don't know if one here and a line of them here and one inside is going to be too much. So I have to decide where to make use of them and where to use something else. Then, thought a skull was appropriate for my Frida shrine. She uses a lot of skull imagery in her paintings, and I just like the idea of having a skull inside this one, since the outside seems to be so pretty right now. There's a skull inside this one because she's kind of sugar skull makeup going on, so maybe a skull inside here would be appropriate. But there's no skull in this one because there's nothing skull-like about her. So instead, I pulled out something that was about the same size and red, which is my theme for this shrine. It's just a red marble. And drop that in there. And that finally is starting to make these a little different. So far, glass bottles and everything, skulls and everything, but this one, I really need to start working on things that are unique to each one. I did a little printing. I've been wanting to put a word here, and I think the word is magic, which is the theme of this tin. And I printed out two versions, one that I can paint and one that's already black. I think the black one is the right one, but I think this might be a little bit too big, so I might pull in the oval a little bit. But that seems to be the right thing for this one. And then I also printed quotes that will go on the inside of each tin. So Frida gets, "I paint my own reality," which is my favorite quote of hers. And I think this is going to get paint blotches all over it. And then I'll re-ink the black printing once I'm done painting. This sort of dream tin gets, "Follow your dreams, they know the way," which I thought was a nice quote. And then the red one gets my favorite quote from Kinky Boots. "Red is the color of sex and fear and danger and signs that say, do not enter." And I'm thinking about reprinting this and maybe doing this sign as a dimensional element rather than flat. I sort of shy away from too much dimensional stuff on the inside of the tins or on the inside of the lids because it presses against what's going on over here. So if I fill the tin and then try to close the lid with something dimensional on it, it won't close all the way. So my solution to that is generally make what's going on inside the lid very flat and then fill up this section. So I've got a flat thing and then a very dimensional thing going on. So now my little tins are starting to go off a little bit in their own directions and starting to take up their own stories.